Dust, an Elysian Tail, seems to have flown somewhat under the radar in comparison to other indie games that came out at around the same time, particularly those that were originally released on Xbox Live Arcade, like Super Meat Boy, Bastion, and Fez. It's yet another game on this channel primarily developed by a single person, which, as ever, already wins huge respect from me even before I play it. Dean Dodrell relied on external help for voice acting, narrative, and music, but all of the programming, artwork, and animation was done by him. The game opens with a lone warrior fighting a mob while a disembodied voice explains that the world is being ravaged by war, and despite the warrior's skills, he would perish on that day at the hands of a child. Our protagonist, whose name is Dust, awakes with no memory of who he is. He is shortly joined by a flying, talking sword called Ara, who seems to know Dust's history. Shortly after this, the guardian of the sword, who introduces herself as the Nimbat Fidget, comes chasing after it. Dust apologizes but is unwilling to give the sword back as it seems to be the only one who knows who he is. Of course, Ara won't just tell Dust what he wants to know and instead insists they head down to the nearby village. Fidget decides to accompany them with the intention of returning the sword as soon as possible. As the three of them make their way down the path, they are ambushed by monsters and must fight their way through, arriving just in time to save the village from being overrun. Just before they get there, Dust realizes he has been here before. So, visuals. Obviously, Dust is a pretty incredible looking game. It's absolutely bursting with colour, no matter the environment you are in, whether it be grassland, caverns, icy mountains, fiery volcanoes. Effort has been made to create a vibrant and luminous feast for the eye. Care has been taken to make sure every character, enemy and background is full of detail. Every animation, from movement to combat, is smooth and gorgeous, just as all the visual effects are flashy and exciting. When you remember that everything you're seeing, asset and animation, are the work of one man, it's a stunning feat. The whole aesthetic isn't even really my vibe. The furry anthropomorphic creatures drawn like a kid's cartoon is a bit too child's fairy tale for my personal tastes. But even so, one cannot deny it looks amazing. On an objective level, I think it's almost impossible to criticize. The only thing I would pick out is that those same flashy effects can become too much. The weather effects in particular can be irritating. Rain and snow tend to muddy the visuals, while lightning can throw you completely off. Not that these have to be present, sometimes there is just too much going on and you can't keep track of it all. We'll come back round to that. The audio isn't as spectacular as the visuals, but it's perfectly solid. The soundtrack has a lot of the tinkly jingly sounds of bells and xylophones that you would expect from a children's fantasy world, while also maintaining a lot of variety. There's obviously a lot of hot-blooded action music. But there's also the calming and relaxing. And the exhilarating and terrifying. My personal favourite is Cyremen Caverns, which sounds like it should be in a Nolan film. The sound effects are just as solid. There's weight behind all the slashing and dashing you do as you face down hordes of enemies. There's nothing to get bored of listening to while you're playing. The voice acting is also very good. I did admittedly roll my eyes more than once when hearing new characters for the first time. Dust sounds like an anime edgelord.
You know, now that I think about it, this isn't the first time I've seen this view. I've stood here before, in this very spot.
Because of course he does. He wears a big hat that obscures his eyes and wields a funny-looking sword. Fidget has an irritating high-pitched whine.
Did you see something move up ahead? I saw something move.
Because of course she does. She's the excitable, childlike, furry sidekick. Ara has an ethereal, dreamy tone.
There is a village beyond these woods. Perhaps finding it will aid in restoring your memories.
Because of course he does. He's the mysterious, centuries-old talking sword. The main antagonist has an aristocratic rumble.
Commander, it is not your place to question what I believe. Our moment of glory draws near, and I want results.
Because of course he does. He's an evil dictator. And the villagers you meet that live underground all speak with deep south accents.
Back, you beast! I got this here spoon and I ain't afraid to use it!
Because they're deep south under the ground. Never mind, scratch that last one. Still, the choice of cast might not be original, but I have no complaints about any of their performances. Every actor delivered what they were given to the best of their ability, and I detected no signs of lack of talent, experience, enthusiasm, confidence. I think every actor did a great job, and all of the lines are clear and mixed well to boot. Dust is what I would call a Metroidvania Lite. It has all the aspects of a Metroidvania. The exploration, leveling up, the gaining of new abilities, gaining access to areas you were previously unable to, often through the use of those new abilities. It has all of this, but it's kept simple. The power-ups you get are things like slide, and wall climb, and big jump when riding on air currents. Uncomplicated stuff, but easy to use and a reason to return somewhere you couldn't reach earlier. It controls well. Combat and platforming is responsive. My only qualm was how the game insisted on slightly knocking you back whenever you leveled up, which was irritating when platforming and on rare occasions kinda fucked you over. However, the combat is fluid, but again, simple. A little disappointingly so. You have X to attack, Y to create a dust storm, and if you press B and then Y, you create a special kind of dust storm. You also have a limited number of combos, a dash and a parry, all of which you learn very early on. From there, the only part that develops is the different kind of dust storms you can create. It's okay for its short length, but not an inspiring fighting system. You'll be using these same moves all the way through, and rarely do you need to change your tactics, particularly not for the first half of the game, where the enemies are rarely fast enough to hit you. Because of this, you can become very overpowered for a time by focusing, as much as you can, on leveling up your damage. You can level Dust up with the experience you gain in 4 stats: max health, attack, defense, and fidget, which is essentially the dust storm damage. As you take damage so little, there's no reason not to focus on pure attack, which allows you to effortlessly wipe out any poor club-wielding, gnoll-like creature that happens to be standing in your way. This insane power reaches its peak when you fight the second boss, who can be wiped out by someone who's playing cautiously in fear of unknown attack patterns, i.e. me, in about 20 seconds. The game does not allow you to totally run away with this, as your highest stat can only be 4 points more than your lowest, ensuring that you do to some extent have to build a well-rounded character. However, whatever you choose to prioritize, as the game progresses it becomes clear that Dust is always going to play like a glass cannon. He will always be able to hit hard, but will himself take plenty of damage if hit. This, along with slightly greater variety of enemy, does at least make the combat more engaging, as small mistakes can lead to death pretty quickly. But it's balanced out by the fact that it's still pretty easy to avoid taking damage. Unless, as mentioned earlier, there becomes too much to keep track of in the midst of all the flashy effects. And this is generally a rare occurrence, until the finale.
What is going on?
I talked briefly in my Baldur's Gate video about how difficult it is for video games to deliver a genuine large battle experience due to the chaotic nature of having so many people fighting in one space. Dust's Final Assault finale faces the same problem. It is a mess of allies and enemies all fighting on top of each other, throwing your timing off and making it hard to see who is about to attack you. And it goes on for far too long. I used more healing items at this point and died more than I did in the rest of the game combined. I don't want to be hyperbolic and suggest that this last section ruined the game for me, but it was enough of a slog battling through the same 3 or 4 enemy types over and over and over again that it certainly left a sour taste. There are 5 bosses in the game and all of them are easy enough. The first 4 are all basic single stage fights with a gimmick involved. The final boss, however, is a rather egregious 4-stage fight that can still be taken down just as easily as the others, if not anywhere near as quickly. When you aren't fighting or platforming, there are some secondary elements to the gameplay. There are, for example, some very light puzzle elements, which mostly involve you using Dust Storm to guide these flying aubergine bombs to destroy barriers which are fairly standard, though they can at times be quite irritating. The only other instance of puzzle solving that stood out to me was when Dust has to restore some defences, which involves restarting a generator and clearing some vines off a water pump. In both instances, you are given a heavy-handed hint on how to do this.
Maybe there's some way we can burn them off?
And the solution is simple. You use Fidget's electricity power on the generator and her firepower on the vines. Now you might be thinking that that seems like something the player could work out for themselves without being given such an obvious hint. But honestly, the fact that they don't explicitly tell you what to do is the greatest sign of respect for the player's intelligence in the entire game. The puzzles are really just there to give you something else to do other than hit things. There is also a light crafting system, which, again, is simple enough. Enemies sometimes drop blueprints for new equipment and also drop the materials needed to make said equipment. You can, and it seems to me worth doing, sell one of any material you receive to the shopkeeper, who will then, when you meet him again, have more of that material in stock, thus allowing you to buy all you need to make whatever new equipment you want with the huge amounts of money you will have also collected. In the chaos of battle, you don't always realise just how many blueprints you are picking up, so it's worth checking your inventory every now and again to make sure you've got the best you can have equipped. The game does have some side quests, though these are generally uninteresting fetch quests, and I got bored of doing them quite quickly. That isn't to say that all of them are the same. One of them, just due to its unique nature, stands out. The town crazy, Reed, keeps panickedly asking you to find and return his cursed box, which, despite dismissing his concerns over the power of the box, you eventually do, only to discover that it is actually cursed and it starts sapping your life. For unclear reasons, you have to go and get yourself killed to lift the curse. Trying to get this done, however, did showcase just how pathetic the early game enemies are. It's nothing extra special, but it was a memorable moment, and I thought worth mentioning. So, what we've established so far is that the game has incredible visuals, good audio, and gameplay that generally holds up but disappoints in a few areas. I have to warn you that we will be continuing on this trajectory as we head into covering the story. Now I'm going to be moving straight into spoiler territory, so if you do fancy experiencing it for yourself, now is the time to skip forward. Continuing from where we left off in the intro, Dust, Fidget and Ara have arrived just in time to fend off the village from monster attacks, with Dust also having a faint recollection of having been in the area before. After a conversation with the mayor, Dust agrees to track down and stop the leader of the attacks. This turns out to be Fuse. He is a Moonblood, who are a race of creatures in this world being exterminated by the Emperor Gaius. Why? Is there any social, cultural and historical context to this genocidal purge? If there is, I don't think it's mentioned. Seemingly, Gaius really doesn't like Moonbloods and has convinced everyone else not to like them either. Fuse has been driven mad by all the persecution he has faced and is now killing innocent people. He has to be put down, but just before he dies, he grows lucid and tells Dust that he remembers him and that Dust is responsible for previously aiding Gaius in waging war against the Moonbloods. From here, there isn't much plot development for a little while. Dust can't remember why he was helping Gaius, but is currently determined to stop him. So, in the interest of getting to him, he goes on a little adventure underground and battles a deity so that she will release the healing waters of the land. Then he has to collect 4 items from a haunted estate so that he can battle a trapped evil spirit which is blocking his access to the mountains. Then he scales those mountains to finally reach another village that he recognizes. Here, we finally learn who Dust is. He was created by the Moonbloods through magic as a Mithrarin, someone with two souls. He is the combination of Cassius, Gaius' assassin, who killed the villagers for being Moonblood sympathizers, and Jin, a young boy who attempted to defend them. They both killed each other at the same time, allowing for the extraordinary circumstance of Dust's creation. Now that he knows who he is, and that he has Jin's noble nature and Cassius' skills with the sword, he commits to joining the Moonbloods in their final assault, then facing and beating Gaius in a fight. During the fight, they sink into the depths of an active volcano. Gaius, clinging onto the edge, grips Dust by the arm and...
You're not Cassius.
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. But Cassius is gone, as is the world we once loved. Cherish it.
The tone of this cutscene is a weird one. I suppose Gaius expressing his desire that Dust should cherish the world despite it not being the one envisioned by him may come from a place of friendship for Cassius, but the way he chucks himself into the lava in slow motion to moving music, it's just like, this guy was a bit of a genocidal maniac. Are we sure he's deserving of such a noble death scene? Anyway, Dust only gets to cherish this new world for about a minute, before he himself is swallowed by lava. But then, as the Moonblood leader eulogizes Dust in a speech,
"Though it may appear that Dust has fallen here today, the force of good is not so easily extinguished. Zen Mithrarin was born of dust, a current to the winds of change, a harbinger of storms yet to come."
Dust.
You know, when I first watched this final cutscene as I finished the game, I wasn't massively impressed. But rewatching it now, it actually just gave me chills, and I have to once again compliment the quality of the music and the art. Despite this, my feelings on the story remain the same. It's fairly generic and predictable and just doesn't really have that much going on. Still, it's okay. It's there. It would feel harsh to severely criticize it just for being bland when it does other things well. Unfortunately, while the game's plot just about gets a pass, I cannot be so generous with some of the writing. It's fine in places and generally passable. The comedy is at a fairly low level, with most of the jokes not only being obvious, but often missing a punchline.
Wait. Did you just put that thing in your inventory?
Yeah? What?
Okay then.
But you can pass this off as being a part of the game's light tone. It was when the game tried to be serious and emotional that really made me cringe. It's difficult to demonstrate this with out-of-context clips, but I'll give a few examples. Dust saves the underground village, Mudpot, by getting the healing waters that run through it running again, but it is too late to save a small boy's father. The boy's mother informs him by saying,
I'm sorry, sweetheart. I truly am.
As if the boy wouldn't believe his mother was unhappy about her husband passing away. The boy keeps yelling to his dead dad that,
Ha! Didn't you hear? I got the water running! Ah! Ah!
But then the next day at his funeral he gives this sickly speech about how Dust has shown him what it is to be strong even when the world is against you, and he's glad he found a friend like him. In another example, when Dust exercises the spirit of a terrible person who, while alive, was ratting out Moonblood sympathizers who were then taken away and executed. His wife, who had left him, has come back to be with him in her final moments. He expresses regret for not telling her what he was doing.
I am so sorry, Cora. I should have trusted you. I should have told you. I thought you would abandon me. I thought the one good thing I ever had would leave me to die alone.
He didn't want to tell his wife about all the innocent people he was having killed because he was worried his wife might leave him. Which she would have done because that's what she did when she found out. But now she's decided she wants to come back to him anyway because he's dead now and he regrets it. The question of does this man deserve forgiveness and peace is briefly raised later, very briefly, and it feels more like an acknowledgement of, yes, we are aware of this moral quandary, and we have no further comment. The worst example is without a doubt when Dust discovers he is Jin and Cassius, and Fidget expresses doubts about continuing to follow him when he isn't sure of who he is.
I just don't get it. It doesn't matter who he thinks he is. He's Dust. That's who he is. That's who I know.
Fidget, please, I can't do this without you.
Can you repeat that?
I said I can't do this without you.
I'm sorry. Nobody's ever said that to me before.
Oh my word.
I don't know. Maybe I just have a cold heart, but I know I at least have the potential to feel emotion, and all these scenes just feel so heavy-handed, like the game doesn't have the emotional maturity to make them feel genuine, and as a result, it's just cringeworthy. Dust and Elysian Tail is a decent game, with a bland story that struggles to deliver on both a comedic and emotional level, wrapped in dazzling visuals, good music, and voice acting that does the best with what it has. Dean Dodrill has stated in the past that he will revisit the story of Dust, though it has been nearly 10 years now. A sequel has potential, but the original came out before Axiom Verge, Hollow Knight, and the Ori games raised the bar for Metroidvanias. A Dust 2 would need to do more to compete in this era, so I guess for now we'll just have to wait and see.